Welcome to the Evergent Podcast, presenting the future of media and entertainment.
Moving on, I think as we scale, something else that we're really starting to see becoming a problem, and it's been a bit of a hot topic for a while now, is the idea of user churn. A problem that really only becomes more severe with a larger scope. More global growth is going to have a direct impact on that. And that growth is essentially can be meaningless if you don't have the capability to keep the customers that you've worked super hard to acquire. I think there's some good news here that some services are starting to realize that, and they're starting to pivot to meet this challenge. There was an example that we actually wanted to talk about with a major Japanese video gaming company. So it's going a little bit away from the video ecosystem, but it's something that really powers this idea about lightweight AI churn prediction deployments. Some stats here: within 8 weeks, using over 2 million behavioral data points, Evergent and this company, they were actually able to hit a 94% accuracy for churn prediction. So we could see the users, the way that they were engaging, were more inclined to be dropping off, which allows service or this particular service to come up with a hyper-targeted offer or a retention campaign for these users, which really did result in significant uplift in user engagement. Guys, from your point of view, it's a really big topic, but in terms of lifecycle-based personalization, in terms of a defense for churn or other topics around about churn, from your perspectives, is there any kind of thoughts that you have around that point?
What we see in that addressability or personalization is usually back in the days, you were segmenting your customers by typical things like demographic and these kind of things. And we see this actually moving away a little bit because it's, as we said, it's more interest driven, more user driven now. And even within the user, depending on the time of the day, for example, or the season, for example, interest shift. That's number one. Number two, within, let's say, households, which we usually talk about when we talk about media and entertainment, we don't talk about a single person, but sometimes, particularly on the TV sector, we talk about households. So you have multiple users you have to address simultaneously. So we see segmentation actually coming a little bit more into the picture again, but more from a behavioral perspective rather than from a demographic perspective, right? So from a life cycle perspective, so what we see and what we advise our customers is you have to address different user segments also differently. So you have to show, for example, more of your catalog to new users than you have to do, for example, for your power users who are coming back with a purpose, with quite clear, ideas in mind what they want to watch. So you have to address them differently, not only one-on-one, but also one-to-many. So basically meaning that you just follow different use cases. For example, for new users, okay, when there is what we call a cold start, so we don't know anything about the user, there are different means to hook them into the service than, for example, as I said, for people who are coming back more regularly. So we have seen this, and we do this with a number of customers where we do like one-on-one and also one-on-many personalization. When you follow this kind of life cycle personalization, as you put it before, Craig, is that we have seen an increase in content consumption by more than 20% from those segments, which is quite substantial, from a, let's say, video consumption perspective.
But
the second thing,
if I can add something, because you made an implication in what you said, which is maybe not obvious for everyone. You started tying together audience behavior, segmentation of that audience into different behavioral patterns, but also how you use the right content to address that. And I think there's an underlying assumption that we're making here that is maybe not clear for everyone, is that having the ability to bring all these many different sources of data, the content information, the consumption patterns, the behavioral data of your audience or audiences, however you segment them, maybe some advertising information, that bringing together all of that data is actually really crucial to be able to be effective in that over the life cycle, a certain viewer or a subscriber. And if you look at it from the AWS perspective, we've seen a lot of the projects dealing with personalization or churn management or even optimization, delivering suboptimal results because the customer hadn't thought about that global data view. And I think we'll talk about it later in the podcast, but I just wanted to mention it here because it's kind of obvious, but it's not always implemented the right way. So
it's a very, very important point. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I think the complication is a little bit even further than that. Because if you have a service provider who has multiple business models, a single subscriber might be in different life cycles in those different business models, right? It can be like for a pay TV service provider, for example, they can be what's usually the case, a power user, if you like, on linear TV, but they're just an occasional user on SVOD. So you need to address them differently depending on where they are. And that actually brings me to the next point, is that it's also important not to stop with addressing users in a meaningful and personalized way when they leave the user experience. You also need to understand, when are they, willing to consume your service, when they're not in your service. So what I mean by that is, we can, for example, identify viewing opportunities. So, for example, users are commuting. So why don't you suggest something for them to download on their device, to watch, on the commute to work, for example. So kind of, expanding the personalization from a typical, dynamic user interface, personalized dynamic user interface into personalized notifications, newsletters, and these kind of things. And what we've seen there as well is, for example, increased click-through rates on newsletters by personalizing them by more than 60%. And that then increases retention rate. So I think that's another important point, is you can't just let the users go when they're not using your service. And you should also not do things like typical services sending out, oh, by the way, it's prime time. Don't you want to watch some TV right now? It's more kind of, more precise, don't annoy them, and make them see the value basically of your service. And I think the last point, and I think we will discuss a little bit later, and Kevin probably has more to say about that, is how you best use the data available to you. Kevin mentioned before different data points you can use. And as you said, you're mixing the information, for example, Virgin have on the user's life cycle to what AWS has based on the user consumption, and what we have based on the profiling information. If you put all of the data together, you have a very, very rich data set where you can pick and match basically what you would like to, or how you would like to address the users.
Yeah, and that leads into then how, once you start having that very rich data set with many different data sources, how do you leverage some of the data wrangling capability? How do you use, for example, generative AI to personalize a given message, or to create a temporary segment and segmentation based on different behavioral data, what content you have, how these audiences that are not on your platform are behaving on other areas? And how do you use these emerging, agentic AI to help drive that personalization, not by automating 100%, but kind of thinking about how you extend your editorial intent across all of these with a scale that is manageable. So
yeah, I think this is a topic, honestly, that we could have a podcast on its own for, because the topic just keeps going on, and even brought thoughts to my mind regarding, once you have that data set, and I know, Kevin, that Evergen and AWS work really closely together on building that data portfolio, and we have access to a lot in there. But there's so many steps of evolution you could go further. I mean, if you identify a certain segment, Tom, you were talking about segmentation, you could identify a segmentation of users that are more inclined to be watching, lifestyle TV, or more TV that lends to a social environment. And, you could even identify that those people even come up with some kind of targeted offer to say, maybe you want to enjoy this content with a friend or a family member. That might make it more of an inclusive experience for everyone. And then that could potentially, open the door to bring more people in, increase stickiness in the consumers, because they're not going to drop off, because it's more of a social thing where they can bring people together. So I think there's just so many steps beyond that you could explore. So yeah, probably enough to have a topic on its own about. So I guess in terms of all that, we can predict who's staying, who's leaving, but doing that at scale, I think that's one part of the problem.